There is a question that has followed me for years. A question that sent me and my wife driving to a suburb of Cleveland, Ohio, just to stand on a plot of grass where a house used to be. How does a dead woman's blood end up under the crystal of a man's watch, if he didn't kill her? This is the story behind the story of the Sam Sheppard murder case. I'm Brian Smith, and today I go somewhere the history books visit, but rarely stay long enough to make you uncomfortable, because that's where the truth tends to live. To understand what happened to Sam Sheppard, you first have to understand what America looked like when it happened. It was 1954. Dwight Eisenhower was in the White House. Rock and roll was barely a whisper. Television had just muscled its way into American living rooms, and people still got most of their news from newspapers. Papers that had no editorial limitations, no social media balance check, and no hesitation. The suburbs were brand new. The American dream had a specific address: a split-level house, a two-car garage, a respectable job. Bay Village, Ohio, a quiet lakeside community just west of Cleveland, was exactly that kind of town. Quiet, respectable, the kind of place where nothing bad was supposed to happen. And the Sheppards fit the mold perfectly. Dr. Sam Sheppard was 30 years old, handsome, athletic. He was the chief neurosurgeon at Bayview Hospital, the kind of man other men envied and women noticed. His wife, Marilyn, 31 years old, was 4 months pregnant with their second child. They lived in a Lake Erie home with their 7-year-old son, Chip. On the surface, they had everything, but surfaces have a way of being deceptive. It was the 4th of July. The Sheppards hosted neighbors for dinner, Don and Nancy Ahern, and they all settled in to watch television. Sam, exhausted from overnight hospital shifts, fell asleep on the couch before the guests even left. Marilyn apparently showed them out and went upstairs to bed. What happened next would consume the next 16 years of Sam Sheppard's life and the next 70 years of American legal history. At approximately 5:45 in the morning, a neighbor named Spencer Houck received a frantic phone call. On the other end, Sam Sheppard. The words, as Houck would later testify, "For God's sake, Spen, get over here quick. I think they killed Marilyn." When Houck arrived, he found Marilyn Sheppard in the upstairs bedroom, beaten savagely. The coroner would count 35 blunt force wounds to her face and head. She was unrecognizable. The word the investigators used was overkill. This wasn't a burglary gone wrong. This was personal. This was rage. Sam Sheppard was found downstairs on the beach, face down in the sand. He told police that he had been knocked unconscious twice. Once when he heard Marilyn scream, ran upstairs and grappled with a large, bushy-haired man, and again when he chased the same man to the beach and again was overpowered. He had a chipped tooth, swollen face, and a cervical spine injury. His injuries were real, but were they enough to explain the rest of the story? Here is where I need to slow down, because this is where it matters. Let's talk about what investigators found and didn't find. Marilyn's blood saturated the upstairs bedroom. The murder weapon was never recovered. A trail of blood drops led to the stairs, suggesting the killer moved through the house. Sam's medical bag had been rifled through downstairs. On the surface, it looked like a home invasion. But a closer look. The neighbors noted that despite the carnage upstairs, despite 35 wounds to a pregnant woman, Sam Sheppard had very little blood on him. His t-shirt was missing entirely. He claimed he didn't know where it was. Police were immediately suspicious. And then there was the watch. Sam's wristwatch was found at the scene, and when forensic investigators examined it, they found something that has never left me. Marilyn Sheppard's blood, her blood, was present not on the watch face, not on the band, but under the crystal, under the glass. Think about that for a moment. Blood under the crystal of a watch doesn't get there from casual contact. It doesn't get there from helping an injured person. It doesn't get there from a fight in a dimly lit hallway. For blood to get under that crystal, the watch had to have been worn during the assault itself, while the blood was still wet, under violent motion, with the force to push fluid beneath the protective glass. To me, that evidence alone tells a story, and it's not the story Sam Sheppard told. Before Sam Sheppard ever sat in a courtroom, he had already been convicted by the press. The Cleveland newspapers were merciless. Headlines screamed, "Why isn't Sam Sheppard in jail?" And "Quit stalling, bring him in." Editorial boards demanded his arrest. The local coroner held a televised public inquest that looked more like an ambush than a proceeding. The circus was so extreme that it would eventually become a landmark in American legal history. The trial began in October 1954, presided over by Judge Edward Blythen, who was reportedly overheard telling journalist Dorothy Kilgallen that Sheppard was, quote, "guilty as hell." The jury was not sequestered for most of the trial. Reporters sat feet from the jury. Jurors' names and photographs were published daily in the papers. The noise was deafening, and justice was barely audible beneath it. The prosecution hammered two things: the lack of physical evidence of an intruder and Sam's motive. Because it emerged during the trial that Sam Sheppard had been having an affair, a woman named Susan Hayes took the stand, and she confirmed it. Sam had a reason. Sam had blood evidence against him. And Sam had a story about a bushy-haired intruder that, to a jury already poisoned by 6 weeks of press coverage, sounded like a desperate fabrication. In December of 1954, after 5 days of deliberation, the jury returned, guilty of second-degree murder. Sam Sheppard, who had sat in that courtroom proclaiming his innocence every single day, was sentenced to life in the Ohio penitentiary. Years ago, my wife Patty and I drove to Bay Village. We made a pilgrimage. I don't know exactly what I expected to find, but I needed to see it for myself. The Sheppard house is gone now. The lot where it stood is quiet, just grass and trees and the distant sound of Lake Erie. We walked the neighborhood and we stood near the water line where Sam claimed he was knocked unconscious for the second time, where he said a large man overpowered him and waded into the lake and disappeared. I stood there and I looked at the water, and I tried to believe it, but I couldn't. We drove to the old hospital where Sam worked. We walked through the corridors of history trying to assemble the pieces, and by the time we drove home, I had made up my mind. Not as a juror, not as a lawyer, as a student of the case who had spent years looking at the evidence. Sam Sheppard was a strong man. He was physically fit. He was trained. The idea that a single intruder knocked him out not once, but twice, and then casually escaped into Lake Erie before anyone arrived, it seemed incredulous to me. The bushy-haired man became almost mythological, a convenient villain with no name, no fingerprints, no witnesses. There was also the testimony from Sam's second wife, whom he married after his release. She described his violent temper during divorce proceedings. It was consistent with a man capable of explosive rage. Blood under the watch crystal, a phantom intruder, a missing t-shirt, a cheating husband, a wife beaten 35 times. My personal verdict was guilty. But the story did not end with the verdict. It rarely does. In 1966, a young and combustible attorney named F. Lee Bailey argued before the United States Supreme Court that Sam Sheppard had been denied a fair trial, that the media circus had made an impartial jury impossible. The Supreme Court agreed. The conviction was overturned. It was a landmark ruling that reshaped how the courts would manage media access for decades. Sam Sheppard was retried in 1966. This time, Bailey dismantled the prosecution's case piece by piece. The key blood evidence was challenged. The forensic science was questioned. The jury this time deliberated for less than 12 hours. Not guilty. Sam Sheppard walked out of that courtroom a free man, and he remarried a German pen pal, Ariane, who had written to him in prison. He tried to resume medicine, briefly became a professional wrestler, and by all accounts, he fell apart. The years in prison, the loss of his wife, and his child's childhood, the relentless weight of the accusation, it broke something in him that no verdict could repair. Sam Sheppard died on April 6, 1970, of liver failure. He was 46 years old. April 6, 1970. That is the day Sam Sheppard died. And on that exact same day, another doctor in another part of America was being formally interviewed by military investigators about the murder of his wife. His name was Dr. Jeffrey McDonald. Less than 2 months before Sheppard drew his last breath, Jeffrey McDonald had called police at his home in Fort Bragg, North Carolina. His pregnant wife, Colette, was dead, along with his 2 daughters, Kimberly and Kristen. All 3 had been stabbed and bludgeoned. McDonald was found injured, multiple shallow stab wounds, and he had a story of intruders. They had overpowered him and killed his pregnant wife and his daughters. The parallels between Sam Sheppard and Jeffrey McDonald are so striking they feel like the same story told twice, in different decades, in different states. Both were doctors. Both had wives who were pregnant and brutally murdered. Both men survived the attack. Both claimed an intruder. Both were known to have had extramarital affairs. Both had physical evidence that pointed inward rather than outward. Both insisted their innocence with a confidence that struck investigators as either absolute proof of truth or absolute proof of a calculating mind. And both cases drew national obsession. Eventually, MacDonald was convicted of 3 counts of murder in 1979 and sentenced to 3 consecutive life terms. He still maintains his innocence to this day. 2 doctors, 2 dead wives, 2 intruder stories, 2 men who swore to their last breath that they didn't do it, and in my estimation, the same verdict for both. History is seductive. It offers us clean narratives. The wrongly convicted man, the victim of a broken system, the evil that slipped through the cracks. We want one of those stories. We want to be certain. But sometimes the evidence doesn't give us certainty. Sometimes the evidence just gives us a dead woman's blood pressed beneath the glass of a man's watch, waiting to be explained. Sam Sheppard's son spent much of his life trying to officially clear his father's name. In 2000, a civil case was tried, and the jury could not find by preponderance of the evidence that Sam Sheppard had been wrongfully imprisoned. After all those years, after all those efforts, still, reasonable people were not convinced. Marilyn Sheppard was 31 years old, 4 months pregnant. She was beaten 35 times. Whoever did that to her deserved to be held accountable. Whether or not the right man ultimately was, that is the question that Bay Village still cannot answer. I drove home from that lakeside neighborhood with my wife Patty. The water of Lake Erie was gray and still, and I thought about what it means to tell a story that no one fully believes, and what it means to tell a story that everyone does. And that's the story behind the story of the Sam Sheppard murder case. I hope you found it as fascinating as I did. The echoes of the past are waiting to be heard. My name is Brian Smith, and we are history.